So let me start by saying I am generally not a big fan of Paul, the ancient and prolific letter writer of the New Testament in the Bible. I disagree with his theology around Jesus, who he was and is, and what the stories of his life and death and resurrection meant, which is why, in part, I'm a Unitarian Universalist rather than a traditional Christian, as much as I resonate with Jesus' life and ministry. For Paul's theology is at the heart of shifting the emphasis from following Jesus to worshiping Christ. However, Paul's skill at organizing religious community was genius, and I admire him for that. Think about it. This man took the stories of a disgraced Jew from the backwaters of the Roman Empire who was executed for challenging the systemic injustices of his time and made him the center of a new religion. Paul traveled around everywhere, evangelizing and setting up house churches in cities throughout the Roman Empire: Galatia, Ephesus, Philadelphia, Colossae, Corinth, among others. He was constantly challenged by the other followers of Jesus who offered different interpretations of this new faith, and under threat for arrest and persecution by the authorities. And he did this work by traveling from congregation, city to city, and writing them letters in between visits to help them through conflicts and to correct any mistakes that he thought they were making. Which, if you think about it, is quite amazing, given that he did not have the benefit of the technology and modern transportation that we have today. I just imagine Paul on Zoom, and it's like, whoa, what he would have done. And I'm quite fascinated by the early Christian communities because before Constantine made Christianity the religion of his empire, they were radical. And that's why the early Christians were persecuted. They often had to meet secretly in people's homes as they gathered around the table for a meal. And they were called to share their worldly goods and gifts in service to one another and to their faith. And they did so as equals, Jews and Gentiles, free and those enslaved, women and men, rich and poor. No matter who you were and what you did for a living, you had a place at the table as equals. And that was a very, very radical idea in a society that was so stratified by social identity. And as Paul reminded the good folks in Corinth, everyone has a gift to offer that matters. No one's gift was better or more important than anyone else's. It was not a competition. The body of faith, the community, could not be whole without each individual person's gifts, as well as their presence, as in S-E-N-C-E, not presence. Almost every Sunday, as I call for the offering, I say that First Parish depends upon the gifts of time, talent, and treasure from all of us for the life and work and ministries of our congregation. And next week, we will kick off our annual stewardship campaign, where we ask everyone to consider how we can each support First Parish financially for the next fiscal year. But treasure is only one of the currencies we give and receive in service to our congregation. Time is another. Giving our time to one another and our congregation as a whole, and it begins by gathering here, whether in the pews or from home, for worship. That's a commitment of time. But there are other ways too. Serving on a committee, offering hospitality for social hour, whether online or in the vestry, organizing, supporting, or donating to a fundraising event, singing or ringing in a choir, working with our children and our youth, offering a listening ear, a ride, or a meal, knitting a prayer shawl, ushering, greeting, reading, leading the covenant, taking care of our staff, our building, our gardens, our grounds, bearing witness to justice through social outreach and advocacy. I could go on and on and on and never cover everything that you offer of your time and energy, your gifts and skills in service to one another and the whole body of First Parish. It does indeed take a village. Which leads to the third gift, talent. Sharing our skills and interests with the body of First Parish. Time and treasure are finite and measurable resources. Some of us are able to give more of one or the other, and some of us less. And our capacity may change over the years, depending on where we are in our lives. But talent, sharing our gifts, our skills, and most especially what gives us joy and energy, these cannot be quantified in the same way. Frederick Buechner says that our life's vocation is where our greatest joy meets the world's greatest need, which can sound really big and overwhelming. But if we believe that our Unitarian Universalist faith matters, that the values we endeavor to practice and the covenant we try to embody through this congregation matter, then we are doing that very thing. And we can bring what we love to do here to help meet the world's needs. When I came across that article by Aaron Wathen about how you can't volunteer at your own church like you can't babysit your own children, it got me thinking about how we share our gifts, especially as we try to recover from the pandemic. I am truly, constantly in awe of how much you all love this community and how much you all give. You are so generous with time, with talent, with treasure. You truly do work for, invest in, and empower what you love here. You don't just recite our covenant, you strive to make it real, a living embodiment of beloved community. You take care of one another out of love, you take care of this place out of love, and you try to make our world a more equitable, compassionate, and just place out of love. You are doing more than volunteering. Hate to tell you this. You serve, you minister, you belong to this body, a whole larger than the sum of its parts, and it's made sacred by each of us. And not just here and now, but carrying on what we have inherited from generations before. I was thinking of that during Rosemary talking about her father and mother. Part of sharing of our time, talent, and treasure is in service of being good stewards, of becoming good ancestors ourselves, in gratitude for those who came before, and in care and commitment to those who will come in the future. During the worst of the pandemic, I witnessed how we used our gifts in adaptive and creative ways. First, in people stepping up to lead new ministries, like establishing a worship tech team, holding the auction online, or hosting social hour via Zoom. Second, I learned that we could still offer our time to attend worship beyond our sanctuary and offer gifts of time and talent from afar, like Fran sending us boxes of prayer shawls from Maine, or Elliot and Marion hosting online social hour from Belmont and Amherst, respectively, or Chris serving on the standing committee from Ireland. And I was humbled by the commitment and the creativity of our staff members and the small team of lay leaders who kept the institution of First Parish safe, solvent, and functional when the majority of us had to stay away. At the same time, we lost some gifts of time and talent. We have all aged 3 years. Our lives have changed, And we cannot just expect the same people to come back and pick up where they left off, like organizing social hour in the vestry or keeping the kitchen clean or running the groups or events they had always run. And because we were not in the building together, we didn't have the opportunity to pass the knowledge from one generation to the next, one generation of leaders to the next. We grieved the loss of strong leaders like Kirk and Carol and Carlene. Meanwhile, our families are still stretched to the limit, and some of us cannot work church back into our schedules. While some of our committees and groups are up and running again, embracing a hybrid world, we still have a couple big holes. All of this to say that as we find our way back from COVID, as we welcome new people into our congregation, which is so great, we have the opportunity to re-engage our gifts of time and talent differently. Part of that is practical work. The standing committee, the staff, other lay leaders, and I are thinking of creative alternatives to how we have always done things when it comes to some of the committees and functions and events that disappeared during COVID. At the same time, though, there is the spiritual work. How would things shift with regard to the sharing gifts of our talent if we understood them not as volunteering or donating to First Parish as an organization outside of ourselves, but as a ministry, as a service, as empowering what we love? As Wathen writes later in her piece, we cannot realistically extract the word volunteer from the life of the church. It is both a noun and a verb, and it's the one that just rolls off the tongue when we are asking people to come and do work, which in the church we are forever asking people to do. Still, I feel a strong nudge to challenge how we talk about and think about the time and energy we spend in ministry. She goes on, it's important to recognize those gifts for what they are, ministry. And I'm not sure the word volunteer does justice to the depths contained in the work people actually do in their churches. Call it serving. Call it discipleship. Call it the priesthood of all believers or mission or the ministry we all share together. But whatever we do, we should remember that we don't just belong to the church, it belongs to us. It's that word belonging that captures me. We live in a consumer culture where we think in terms of transactional relationships, as in, am I getting my needs met, rather than how do we belong to each other? And by each other, I don't mean just us gathered here in the sanctuary and online, but how do we belong to each other out there? How do we belong to the earth? How do we belong to the generations? How do we belong to our covenant, our values and ethics? How do we belong to what we name as sacred or divine, worthy of our ultimate commitment? Paul understood that the deep commitment to those little house churches he built at great risk to all involved began with that invitation to belong. Everyone belonged at the table, no matter how they were regarded elsewhere in society. And for that reason, their gifts mattered in serving one another, in serving their faith. Belonging begins with an invitation, with welcoming everyone as we are, for who we are. But for that invitation to belong to matter, to transform us and the world around us, asks for a commitment from us to embody it. Congregational life is a labor. It is a labor of love. As you've heard me say before, First Parish doesn't just happen. we empower it through our love, through investing our time, our talent, and our treasure. So read the announcements and the newsletter. Talk to me, talk to Dolores, to Christopher, to Ken. Who is here from the standing committee? Would you please stand up for a minute? Talk to these people. Membership folks, who's here from membership? Talk to Carla, talk to Chris, talk to Diane. And listen. Oh, Caroline, talk to Caroline. She always has ideas. Talk to each other. Listen for what calls to your spirit, what calls to your deepest joy, and come in that way.